welcome to Reptile Fight Club. I'm your host, Justin Zoolander, and with me, as always, Rob Stone. How's it going, Rob?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah, can't complain. If I did, probably nobody would listen, so we'll skip the complaints for now. Yeah, getting excited for IHS. That's just around the corner here. Well, I guess about a month away, but yeah, getting close. 4th of July is a fun holiday, so looking forward to that. It's my wife's holiday, so that was kind of co-opted from the beginning of our marriage. So yeah, we go with her family, but they have a pool, so that's nice. I picked up a thermal camera, so I'm excited to try that out too. It's I went outside and scoped out the dogs like right after I got it, but I haven't done like a full field test yet. But yeah, kind of excited to try that out, see what I can find. But should be fun. Anything new or exciting with you?
So you haven't tried it in the herp room yet, then?
No, not yet. I don't know how
it'll be interesting.
Realistic it'll be. But yeah, I'll bring it to IHS and do a little herping out there. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I know, as you say, you got the holiday coming, so busy at regular work, busy at the extra, and then so all good though. All good.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's not going to be as useful for herps as it is for mammals and birds, but we'll see.
Yeah, but maybe, right? With either retained heat, and the question was, it based on the functionality, if it'll show things that are actually cooler than ambient, then we might see things that have been estivating and coming out. So, yeah, I'm very curious to see it in action.
Yeah, that'll be the hope. All right, well, enough of the chit chat, I suppose.
Without further ado,
yeah, we'll bring on Christopher Brown. Chris Brown, how you doing?
Great, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. So, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself? You can go in as deep or as shallow as you want, and we can follow up with nosy questions if needed.
Sure. So yeah, I'm here, based in Southeast Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
Not originally from here though. Originally from the Northeast, New Jersey. Born and raised, and then after I graduated high school, that was in 2010. I moved out to the great state of Oklahoma in the prairie, Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And went to school there at Oklahoma State University.
Okay.
I was there for 8 years with the goal of becoming a veterinarian, which I was successfully able to complete.
Cool.
In undergrad, I was heavily involved in, the Wildlife Society, a couple of zoology clubs. I was a zoology major and a wildlife biology major. So I've always kind of had to focus on wildlife and conservation. And it was probably around that time when I went to Stillwater that I started getting more into herping a bit. I was always into, reptiles. Like, this is a common theme and story from a lot of people. But since I was younger, really, and growing up in New Jersey in the 90s, early 90s, I was 9 months old when Jurassic Park was released in June of '93. So that movie had a huge influence on my life.
Right.
I was also raised around the time when Animal Planet was kind of peaking. Steve Irwin, Jeff Corwin.
Right.
And then Mark O'Shea was around during those days too. And he still is. But his show was getting had quite a following as well. So my dad, he wasn't really a herpetoculturalist. He had a couple things on the side, but he did have some cool things. Back then green iguanas were big.
Right.
He had a big one down in the basement. His name was Iggy. But one that always stood out to me and which I have aspirations of working with, but the price point is just pretty high right now, but is the Shinosaurus. Chinese crocodile lizards. He had one of those in the 90s, and
oh, cool.
His name was Godzilla, and unfortunately, like that was a time people really didn't know what they were doing,
Right.
in terms of captive care with them, and they actually lent him out to someone on a breeding loan, and of course, when he got him back, the lizard wasn't in very good condition and didn't
Mm.
make it too much longer after that.
You
But that
shoot.
my mom said I tried to exhume Godzilla when we buried him. I was very upset, and there's sentimental value now to own one again, and I will. I just
Right.
need to set aside the funds and the space, as everything
Mhm.
is kind of difficult when you don't have a designated building.
Right. I've got a couple friends that breed those or work with them. They're
Yeah,
seems like they're being, produced here and there. Not too commonly, but
yeah, exactly. I have a couple of friends actually down here that do work with
mhm,
them. So
cool.
eventually I'll
Yeah.
probably end up at least getting one, hopefully two, or more from them at some point. But there really is no rush. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, unfortunately, where I was, and I was raised in northern New Jersey. My high school was on the border of New York State.
Okay.
It was also in the most densely populated part of the
Mhm.
state, so very close to New York City. I mean, I was 20 minutes from the George Washington Bridge.
Right.
Fortunately, there was a lot of development up there, and the herp diversity was a bit limited, although you could find them, more in the Palisade Cliffs. The
Mhm.
Palisades are very cool area. Um, if it's along the Hudson River, and there's just these massive drop-off points.
Mhm.
You could look up the geological history of that area, but it's a very unique, place, and there was some things up there. New York State also, there was a great state park, second biggest state park, I believe. It was about 40 minutes from my house, called Harriman State Park, which did have a pretty decent, herp diversity as well.
I
But,
have been there.
really? Nice.
Yeah.
Did you did you find anything?
So there's definitely stuff there.
Yeah.
We didn't turn it out on that day, but yeah, we'd gone with our local folks that are up there, plus the PA folks and all that as part of a junket. So
Nice. Yeah, maybe I'll hit you up for some connections up there, because, I was there. I always try to go and hike when I'm there, but I don't. I only go back once a year or twice a year, and I don't always have the time. But it'd be nice to establish some connections. But yeah, I was kind of quite far from the Pine Barrens, which is where people think of New Jersey herps.
I
But
just think of ticks when I think
yeah, well, that is really horrible up there,
Yeah.
with Lyme disease especially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, unfortunately, like my area, just because of the development, it was so patchy,
Mhm.
fragmented area. There wasn't a whole ton of diversity where I was. But if you got out the Palisades or Harriman, you started seeing a little more.
Yeah.
But in Oklahoma, yeah, I mean, really, I remember specifically I was so passionate about reptiles at that time that I remember even before classes started in my freshman year, I was already linking up with researchers in the zoology department to help out with a collared lizard study, eastern collared lizard
Okay.
study that they were doing. It was a behavior study, which was really
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah.
Um, and and yeah, I mean, as my academics progressed throughout the years, unfortunately, I just couldn't explore the state as much as I used to. I did take a really good
Right.
trip down to Southeast Oklahoma after that, with a couple of the herp folks after my freshman year. That was spring of 2011, probably early
Mhm.
May, to it's called McCurtain County. That's the extreme southeast part of Oklahoma. You have a lot of diversity there. It's like kind of the northeastern extreme of American alligator goes into Oklahoma. So that was
Mhm.
cool to see.
Hmm.
You have some cool herp diversity in that area as well, and that's where I got my first prairie king, copperheads.
Mhm.
Um,
did you see any of the western pygmy rattlesnakes out there?
no, I did not. I would have loved to. Trying to think back, that was so long ago. I was recently came across some photos, but I was also into birds too. I mean, that kind of took over for a long time afterwards, because
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been into birds and herps. A lot of my herps are considered maybe bycatch of bird watching. I have an extensive bird birding list. I mean, I know
Uh-huh.
this a herp podcast, but I mean, I've traveled to quite a few countries looking for birds, and now I always incorporate a herping trip or two in those travels. But right now, I think I have over 1,400 species,
Oh,
of,
wow.
and I'm trying to get
Yeah.
5,000.
Uh-huh.
So really half the species. So
Wow.
so yeah, but with academics and everything else, especially once you hit vet school, things kind of just the
Take a
free
sideline.
the free time and keeping as well. I mean, I had a YouTube
Right.
channel back in high school. It was so funny. I had just shy of 1,000 subscribers of
Mhm.
showing my collection back. I mean, this was in like when Brian Barczyk was like peaking and
Right.
uh on YouTube, and I would always go to the White Plains Expo, which I really enjoyed. It's been a long time since I've been. But that was in New York State, and I didn't have I kept snakes in my closet. My mom wasn't too happy about that. But that those were some really special years, and but unfortunately, the keeping when I hit school, I did have a Mississippi map turtle in my dorm room early freshman year, which was allowed. Uh,
Mhm.
but uh, but the keeping really subsided until a little in vet school. I did get some boa constrictors. I actually, this was now I was in vet school from 2014 to 2018. I did have some Dominican red mountain boas too, which were just starting to get popular. Uh, and then I left Oklahoma. I graduated in 2018, and then I moved out west and
Mhm.
Washington State. And I thought I really honestly, I looking back, I should have done more herping up there. I really didn't do much. Um,
Right. It's tricky especially during a professional degree. So
yeah,
you did your DVM in Oklahoma then?
yeah,
Okay. And
yeah,
up to Washington for
yeah.
did
It
you
was
do
more.
residency or is it?
No, no, I did not do a internship or residency. I just
Mhm.
went right into small animal, and
Right.
which really in the long run wasn't for me. I still do it on the side, but uh,
Right. Kind of pays the bills, right? That's what I hear
yeah,
from a lot of
yeah,
vets. Like
yeah.
it's hard to do anything else because that's where the money is to keep
Mhm.
you
So
employed.
exactly. So I kind of did that until around COVID, and then I transitioned and eventually found my way into laboratory animal medicine, which I really do
Okay.
a lot better. Um,
Mhm. And is that so that's what you're doing now down in
that's what I'm
Louisiana?
doing now. I've been doing that since like 2021.
Okay.
So
Do you, like, oversee the animal facility at a university? Is that kinda
yeah, I'm not the director,
Mhm,
but I am a clinical veterinarian
mhm.
at
Okay.
Tulane. And yes,
Well,
we
yeah,
oversee a lot of we have a lot of rodents. The stuff we feed our snakes,
yeah.
mice, rats, and help train residents that are interested in
Yeah.
pursuing specialty in lab animal medicine, and
Mhm.
then um, a lot of didactic courses, students.
Mhm.
Also on the eye, an alternate member on the eye cook, which you know
Yeah.
the eye cook people like to roll their eyes at the eye cook, but it is important. It is mandated
Yeah.
by the federal government. So
The IACUC committee oversees and
yeah,
regulates animal usage at the
yep,
university to make
yep,
sure you're being ethical and treating them humanely and things like that, so
exactly. And
my the guy who oversees our animal facilities on campus, we did our PhDs in the same lab, and so he had a DVM, so he got a job as a research professor
yep.
in our group, and then after the former director quit or retired, he took over as the director, and that actually was the spot I got when I finished my PhD was his old job, so
Oh,
it's
nice.
kinda good timing
Yeah,
all around
yeah.
there, so
It's the eye cook is the governing body of university research if you're
yeah.
using.
So he's really good to work with, though. So it's been nice. Yeah, he's kind of the head of the ICUC and the head of the facility. So it's good to have former lab mate be the head of those things. It's not that we get any favoritism. He still makes us jump through all the hoops, but he understands what we're doing, and so he's pretty helpful. Like he's not a blocker, he's kind of facilitator, so that's always nice. So hopefully facilitator.
You got to work. You're all part of kind of the same team. You're trying to drive good research results, and with good results comes good animal care.
Right.
While we're here, Chris, what does that licensure process look by state? So is it a state government thing? Is it just based on you graduated from school? Is there additional tests do states
each state
accept licensure from other states? What does that look like?
No, there's not like reciprocity, so to speak. You have to get licensed in each state that you practice in. So in lab animal, there are a little more exceptions to that. Typically, like you could essentially have, like, just say an Oklahoma license and still work in a lab animal facility as a veterinarian in Louisiana, but that is not the case at all for a small animal practitioner like dog or cat. You'd have to have that, so that state license. So, but in lab animal too, you have the option to get specialized as a board certified laboratory animal veterinarian. In vet med, you don't, again, most private practitioners in dog and cat world pass their boards for what we call the NAVLE. It's a national licensing exam that you take at the end of your 4th year of veterinary school. And that's fine. Like, most people do it. There's nothing wrong with that. You have the option, if you wanted to pursue further specialization. You could be, you could do an internship, a rotating small animal or exotic, say, rotating internship, and then go on to specialize in, surgery or internal medicine or radiology or dermatology. There's a lot of specialties. One is laboratory animal medicine, and there's 2 ways to go about that. It's not like this for every specialty, but for lab animal medicine, you could get through the it's not really a grandfathering in, but you could basically, instead of doing a residency in lab animal medicine, you could work like 6 years in lab animal, and then you have to publish a paper, be a first author, and then you could sit for your exam. So I'm now basically eligible to take it with this paper. Actually, we just was accepted with actually Zach, Dr. Loafman was on it as well. But yeah, that's just,
we'll chat about that in a bit. But,
we'll talk about that a little bit.
Put a pin in that.
Yeah. So that's what I do now, professionally.
Is there a vet school at Tulane?
No. There is the only vet school. So there's not many vet schools at all. I mean, when I was applying to vet schools back in late 2013, early 2014, I guess, that was, there was only like 28, 30. There's a few more now.
Our university just started one at Utah State University. Yeah, we have we had a 2-2 with Washington State, and now they've moved and transitioned to a full 4-year vet program at Utah State. So my wife actually works for the vet school, and
not all of them now. Like, historically, they used to all have teaching hospitals attached to the university. Not all of them do.
Yeah, not the one here. We just have like all the local vets that kind of help out, I guess.
Yeah, I know. Clemson recently started one as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so, yeah. At that time, there wasn't very many. So
right.
But the only one we have here in the state of Louisiana is LSU.
Okay.
And that's in Baton Rouge.
Did your vet school in Oklahoma, did it have a teaching hospital?
Yes.
Okay.
It's one of the, like, I guess there's, like, historically the older vet schools, and the ones that have been established for decades now all had teaching hospitals.
Hmm.
The newer ones, not all of them do. They're outsourcing more to for your 4th year clinical rotations to go to some private practices
Right.
that are contracted with the school.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's there's a shortage of vets. We all know that.
Right.
It's it is slowly growing in a way, but still, it's a hard field to get into, and
Hmm.
there some burdens that come with it as well. I mean,
Right.
being especially now, just the student loan debt is crazy. The cost of going to vet school is very,
Hmm.
very high, and you know the salaries have gone up since really COVID for veterinarians.
Yeah.
Prior to COVID, it wasn't as high. COVID really, when everyone was getting pets at home, it really shot up a lot of the salaries.
Hmm.
Which is good, because when your debt to income ratio is so high, it takes a long time compared to like a medical doctors go for years of training, could be
Right.
up to 12 years. However, you are making quite a bit more in your salary uh,
Yeah.
to
I
pay loans off.
Mhm.
So I mean, but still, some vets do very are
Right.
that's if you own a very successful practice, or especially like if in your it's very regional, but if you're like an emergency medicine too, but like
Mhm.
our vets, man, they make some good money.
Right. Yeah, I had a grad student that was doing a vet residency at our, diagnostics lab at the university,
Yes,
and, they told him, "Oh, you have to do a PhD as well while you're doing your residency," and so
yeah.
he got to be in my lab. He worked with Zika, but
If he was a
um
pathologist, was he?
yeah,
Yeah,
pathology.
so
Yep,
that's
yep.
another specialty of
Vet
that you
pathology.
could be a boarded
Yeah.
pathologist. I love pathologists. I'm friends with a few. If I
Uh,
have any issues with my even reptiles, if I have to like euthanize an animal, or if an
right.
animal, whatever, just drops dead, I'll usually do a gross necropsy, collect the tissues, put it in formalin, and send it to him.
Mhm.
Like, hey, what do you see
Yeah.
in the microscope? Like,
Yeah. Very helpful in that regard.
histological lesions and or anything, and they're pathologists are so smart. They know
Yeah.
everything. um,
He was kinda complaining because he's like, "Man, these medical doctors, they have to learn, like,
yeah,
the foot or the ear, nose, and throat of one
they're
species,
so
and
specialized.
the vets have to learn a
I know.
bunch of different species and all,
Too.
organ systems, and they're expected to
Especially,
know a lot more,
yeah,
but
I
then
mean,
they get paid less than a doctor."
they do, and I mean, in lab animal medicine too, like the exam for that is you got to know a ton. It's like an exotics vet, but um, you know, geared towards research, not a
Yeah,
client or the
yeah,
animal. So, but the list is ginormous.
right.
The backbone or the Bible of our field is what they call the Blue Book. It's this massive,
Mhm.
massive textbook that has like all the potential laboratory animal species
Right.
that you got to know front and back, and then all the literature as
Yeah,
well. And then you have to know your pathology. They'll show you, tissue slides on the exam and what's going on here. It's a lot. But
mhm.
I mean, it's a good field. Like I said, the salaries have gone up, thankfully, since COVID, and it allows me to really, you know, learn a lot about all different species. And the past few years, I've really dove deep into reptiles and
Mhm.
keeping and being more involved in like the professional society for reptile amphibian vets, which is ARAB, Association of Reptile Amphibian Veterinarians. I've
Yeah,
met some really great resources from zoos and private practices and all over. So there's
nice.
a lot going on. So
Is there any, reptile-related research going on at LSU?
at LSU, yeah, they do. I don't work with anyone from
No?
LSU, but they do have a very, very strong department for when it comes to reptile related research. I know Dr. Mark Mitchell over there. He's been there for a long, long time. He is very, very well known and very, very well respected when it comes to reptile research. he's published, I don't even know how much, but he does a lot of work with UPB. They do alligator research up there too.
Okay.
They do a whole slew of clinical reptile medicine research there, and it's
Yeah.
very beneficial there. They have clinicians
Okay.
there that are really moving the field and making strides. So it's good.
But you're not overseeing
Not
any
involved.
other veterinary care or anything? Okay.
No.
That'd be, that'd be fun to kinda branch out into that and, help out with there, get you some exotic experience and things like that.
Yeah, recently I've considered, and I haven't, reaching out to some of the alligator farms here. Really, the only commercial, like, we don't talk about commercial uh, reptile production,
Right.
like a um, not herpetoculture, but from like a livestock point of view.
Mhm.
That really, the alligator is the only animal that would fit, only reptile that would fit under that category, because there is a demand for reptile meat. You come to
Right.
Louisiana, Florida, the deep South, Texas,
Yeah.
they serve alligator all over the place. There's also
Mhm.
the hides that they sell,
Mhm.
you know, boots and belts and overseas for fashion.
Right.
So there is that's really like the only, what I would call, like, consider the livestock of reptiles is alligators. Now, in other countries, they do more of like snake farming. Like, I know
Right.
in Asia, they do that.
Mhm.
And I think in Africa, they might do it
Or
as well.
turtles or frogs,
Yeah.
bullfrogs, things like
Yep.
that.
Exactly. Frogs too. That's very
Yeah.
good. So, um, yeah, yeah, it's
Very cool.
very.
So you mentioned Arab, and I'll hand you the soapbox if you want to take it for a second. It's sort of a common presentation within herpiculture, right? And I just listened to really good the CCR episode on mites, right? I thought there was a ton of
Yeah,
good
that was
content there,
good.
but then in it, Clint sort of presented, possibly with the same context that I'm giving it here, the idea that a lot of herpetoculturists tend to underestimate the potential of vets to be useful or helpful and to bring their animals and this sort of thing. And that's sort of probably a historical artifact that maybe isn't totally true now, where we say, oh, vets don't know anything about reptiles, and kind of prejudicing towards knowledge within the community or your own sort of personal experience or whatever, and favoring that over potential knowledge of people who are actually trained in the subject, at least to some extent. So
Mhm.
there you go. I've handed you a soapbox if you want to take it.
Yeah. So, and I believe Dr. Zach Whitman was also on that episode. I recently listened to it. He did a very good job with that. Yeah, historically, the relationship between the client or herpetoculturist and vets has not been the best. I think it is slowly improving. I think even as veterinarians, we're starting to branch out a little more. I know ARAB is doing more to help people, clients, learn about who in the area sees reptiles. And actually, on the ARAB website, there is a a a tab where you could find a reptile vet, if you, in your area, potentially, if you put in your zip code, which is very helpful, because again, not every vet is comfortable seeing reptiles. Um, I guess what's different between me and, there's quite a few of us out there, they just don't advertise as much as, I keep a pretty decently sized collection, and I also breed, and I do sell stuff on the side too. So I am a herpetoculturist. I am a veterinarian. I like kind of being a liaison between the two, and I want to help out. Loafman always talks about, but bridging that gap between the academics, the herpetoculturists, the veterinarians, and all
Mhm.
kind of being on the same page. So,
Right.
it takes a lot of knowledge sharing. You got to be careful with, for years, a lot of people would gatekeep, which again, we're getting better at that. Um, I think also too, it, it's it's a fact that not a lot of people want to bring it their animal, especially if it's an inexpensive animal, maybe $250 or less to a vet, because it's like, well, by the time I get all these workups, the exam, the diagnostics, everything, I'm already past the cost of the animal, so I might as well just get another one.
Right.
When you take your animal to a clinician, it is a business. It's
Mhm.
not a free service. We're not running off insurance like human medicine is. Now, there is pet insurance. I do recommend it. In fact, my dog today just got a TPLO, a knee surgery, because she blew her cranial cruciate, or is commonly known in humans as an ACL.
Mhm.
Um, and even I have it, so that's great. And I did this a few years ago, and at that point, in Justin's podcast again, Snakes and Stogies, I there really wasn't a lot of options for insurance for exotic animals, but they seem to be coming around more, which is good. I'm glad to see that,
Mhm.
especially if you have an expensive snake or turtle, tortoise, lizard. Uh, it just depends on the uh, on the provider, but there are more companies offering insurance for exotic animals, which is great.
Mhm.
So now the thing is, and I always mention this, what scares me, the people spending 10 grand plus on a Boland's python or a Madagascar ground boa, where this is not a racehorse. So this is not an insured animal. If something goes wrong, you're going to get compensated a certain percentage if it dies. You have no idea if that animal has maybe some type of tumor in it, maybe some type of, uh, you know, cardiovascular disease, heart-based mass, whatever is going on, and it could just drop dead tomorrow, and you could be out of a serious load of money. And hopefully, the person that you bought it from is willing to work with you, but there may not be people that are, and that's just to me scary. So you have to be. I don't know. That's just it can be kind of a risky investment. I always tell people that too. I do have. I will splurge on occasion, but I do have a limit. Because I'm not willing to drop that much money on an animal.
Mhm.
And reptiles intrinsically do tend to be better at hiding those things, right, than other groups of
Absolutely,
animals.
absolutely. That's
So
why
it's not necessarily even nefarious, right? I mean, that's the other aspect of that, right? Is even in the framing, and hopefully they'll work with you. Is it not necessarily there are certain problems that fall into the box of known or should have known, and there are other things that are unknown unknowns, right?
exactly, exactly. We're not doing a CT on a Boland's python before the sale. Uh,
Mhm.
and we're also not doing like a a BSE, a breeding soundness exam on this Boland python to make sure he or she is fertile before sale, like you would in a cattle or livestock. Uh,
Mhm.
so again, is, there's a lot more risks involved. I mean, if you want to spend that money, by all means, I am, good for you. But for me, just knowing how many diseases there are in reptiles and amphibians, and fetching that much uh, for paying that much for
Mhm.
one kind of scares me, because you just never know. And they're just masters of disguise with when it comes to disease and pathogens, really up until the end.
Right.
So
It's also hard to, I mean, if there's no treatment for it, like that's usually what's frustrating is like if you do get a serpentovirus or something like that, if there's nothing you can do except supportive care, it's like, well, why would I take it to the vet and spend hundreds of dollars for them to tell me, like, oh, it's just gonna die or it's gonna,
and
you
then
know,
the
keep it
scary
separate.
the scary part is too then that the spread into your collection as well. That could just be a horrible loss.
Right. Is there is
Investment
there
point.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, no,
Is
no.
there any move so I know there's like diagnostics labs that will do, testing for serpentoviruses and things like that.
Uh-huh.
Do the vet clinics have anything like that? And is there any kind of push or drive towards that with exotic vets?
But I don't know, like a tableside, like, you know, rapid,
Mhm.
snap test like we test for heartworm or tick-borne diseases in a small animal clinic.
Yeah, those probably haven't been developed yet, but
Yeah, no, that would be fantastic. That
right.
it would, although that just takes so much R&D, and truly,
Mhm.
how many people are willing to do that? I just don't know if that would the return on the investment from the clinic, if that would be worth it. Now,
Right.
there are really good diagnostic labs out there. One
Mhm.
of which is the University of Florida.
Yeah.
Have a great, Dr. Oz runs that, and they
Yeah.
well, he did. He still is in that. I don't think he runs the lab anymore, but he was the one that really uh, helped develop a lot of tests. Along with, I mean, before him was Dr. Elliot Jacobson, who
Mhm.
you'll see at Daytona every year selling indigo snakes on his table.
Right.
He's got some awesome animals, and for a pretty good price too. Uh, but yeah, there's no, like, as far as I know, like, I don't personally know any like, tableside tests that are in development now, but they could be. I just am not aware. And again, I'm not also in a clinic doing this every day as a reptile clinician. So,
Right.
uh, yeah, I'm not as up to date on that as some other people in the industry.
Mhm.
Well, and another confounding factor with reptiles compared to either small animals or horses or whatever is it does seem like our local, meaning within our house or within our cage conditions, have so much more of an impact on reptiles and their ability to thrive than it is for a horse, say, right? It seems like that they're pretty adaptable relative to any sort of human condition in a barn or whatever that would be.
Exactly.
Mice, rats, same sort of thing at human tolerable temperatures. They're probably doing okay.
Exactly.
Um,
A lot of it comes down to husbandry.
and that's so variable, right? So one of
Yep.
the you were just on Snakes and Stogies, really enjoyed that. Always enjoy it with Schmitty and Phil. But I did have some prompts out of that we'll kind of hop into and out of or whatever. So one of those that really jumps to mind, right, is you talked about the difficulties you've had with Senecolis in your you've had generally with Senecolis. And the interesting part is that so I've had Senecolis once, and then ultimately I sent him down to Dustin, who's in Tucson, in range and all that. And but he only wanted him after he found one in the wild, and then he turned up two in short order. And Justin was a part of that. Sadly, I was not, and it's still, you
Still
know,
haunts you.
yeah, I feel feelings about it still. But the point I wanted to draw is that I found him to be totally easy and inconsequential. Didn't do anything weird. Kept him on paper with water and didn't even put in a moist hide, nothing like that. And they do just fine, man. And I know their reputation for doing, particularly adult males. That's what's commonly captured. They don't necessarily
Mhm.
do well. All this stuff. I found that I got him from Gerald Merker as, maybe it had a feed once, sort of babies. Raised them up to 3 or 4 years old, whatever they were when I sent them down to Dustin, and had literally no problems with them whatsoever.
I think well, what you said you got it as a baby, or were they already
Yeah,
adult?
they were captive bred babies. Yeah.
Yeah. So, uh, all mine, and I haven't had a large sample size. I have had 4, now I have 3. 2 of those were babies, and I got them just they weren't even feeding yet. They had just been freshly hatched, and they the male of the Senecolis, took a little longer to get started, but he did. The female was fine. I didn't have any issue. I think it's an age thing too, and you see this a lot with just wild caught animals too. I mean, the younger they are, traditionally, if they're coming from the wild, they tend to adapt a little better than an adult. Now, there are exceptions. Again, I have Loxosemas here that are all wild caught, imported legally, and they do fine. So it depends on the species, but there are, there in general, I feel like younger animals, just because they haven't had their whole life history um, outside yet before reproduction, may do better. Now, again, all mine are captive bred. The 2 adult males I received late, well, yeah, it was the fall of last year. One just never adapted to the conditions in my house. Just didn't do that well at all, and unfortunately, passed. The other one was doing fine, and then just for, yeah, like 4 months, decided, "Yeah, it's not time for me to eat anymore." So, about a month and a half after not really eating, I put him in brumation, like most people do, and then I was like, "Alright, I'll just wait till afterwards, see how he does." I got him out of brumation a few months later, and he still really didn't wanna eat much. Uh, at that point, I started to notice a decrease in body condition score. I could tell he was getting thinner, and I was like, "Crap, I don't want him to." I actually brumated both of them, and again, that the one that just didn't make it was never, didn't wanna eat beforehand, and then didn't wanna eat after. The other one did eat great initially, then went off, and I was like, "Well, what are we dealing with here?" Um, so I didn't know if it was like a seasonal thing, but then again, my younger ones that I got that really, like that young male, like I said, gave me a little difficulty early on, but both of them have been fine ever since. They never went off feed really much in the wintertime. Uh, and they are just a very sensitive species, in my opinion, for a rat snake.
I guess I'm just throwing out there. So my room ambient relative humidity is
Mhm.
like average over the course of the year is going to be somewhere in that 18 to 25% range.
Yeah, that's
And
lower than
at a
me.
high end, yeah, when it's sheeting outside, and the very rare occasion that it is, it'll be like up to 33, 35%. And so something that's sort of raised in that exposure, even within a monsoon environment, right, that it's acclimatized or, evolutionary design to be something much closer to that with sort of seasonal variation where it'll spike up, but even that within the course of sort of hours and then dissipating. It's got to be wholly different to your room, which is probably what in the mid 60s at a low end, mid 50s at a low
It's
end.
yeah, mid-50s. Yeah, really, especially this time of year when the AC is blowing, the humidity does drop. Um, but again, they don't some animals just,
Maybe
they
the younger
stress
they are, the
they can
more adaptable they are to
exa
that
well,
change.
that's what it is. I think that's a major factor, and also, um, some are just cannot adapt to a new environment, and unfortunately, stress does them in. I would have loved to do a necropsy on that animal, however, it always happens when you're away. It He passed when I was away. I come back, the reptile room is smells like hell. I'm just so my nose is so keen to the smell of death. Being a vet, like, you get used to that. That
Or
was, like,
even just a herpetoculturist who's been in the game a long
yeah,
time.
yeah,
You
and
know
you
that.
you know something is dead. I was like, "I don't think this is a regurg or anything," because I do try to time my feedings if I go on a trip, a few days out, and I like to also, like, do it, like, maybe feed really no later than 4 days before I leave, so then I most animals will evacuate their bowels by that time, so I could spot clean everything before I leave and really not worry about it. But I would have loved to do necropsy on that animal, but unfortunately, it was decomposed, by the time I got back. Um, but yeah, I mean, I changed stuff up. Now everyone's doing fine now. It just maladaptive syndrome could be one of them. Acclimation syndrome. These are not really legit terms, but they're just not able to establish themselves in a new environment, and sometimes that happens, unfortunately. So, um, but what was your sample size, Rob? Just 2?
So yeah, mine was just the pair, and they both did great. The interesting thing to me, the kind of the parallel as you were talking about your conditions not being exactly Florida or whatever, but even Clint, right? He was talking about being in Southern Illinois or Southern Indiana, talking about rosy boas, and sort of the idea that in that humid environment, in that ambient humid environment, that rosy boas, oh, we only offer them water once a week, all these sort of limitations that they have to impose that I never found to be an issue here in Colorado. So you could keep, you could just keep. I would always just put in the 8 ounce or 8 or 12 ounce water
I
bowl,
do.
same toys, and
I have 30 rosy bows here. That's my snake. I have a that's like my bread and butter is rosies, and they all do great.
They all
Yeah.
do great,
I
right?
mean,
But reputationally, right, the herp knowledge or whatever, herp community would say, "Oh, they always struggle in Florida," which is interesting, kind
I
of
don't,
weird.
yeah, I don't, I guess. I mean, but then again, you talk about Craig Trumbauer lives in Florida. I've gotten roses from him. He's been producing roses for a long time, and he does very well with them. It's tough to say. I mean, sometimes locality, but sometimes just that individual themselves. I've done rosies. I've been very successful with. I love them. They're easy. Um, they for
Chris,
the
would you say that maybe sometimes people make excuses based on general trends or herp history,
yeah.
rather than sort of owning
I
their own?
wasn't gonna say that because I didn't want to offend people, but yes, I love like, and Loafman talks about it all the time, like questioning, just question authority, I guess. Although it's not authority.
Accepted logic
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
whatever.
just
Herp,
yeah,
herp dogma.
yeah, because a lot of times it's not always true. I mean, the same thing goes for the uh the sub-ox. I mean, I've had
Mhm.
kept sub-ox here. I haven't bred them, but I've kept them here for now 3 4 years. Doing I have four, not a huge sample size, but they all do great. I mean, I Dusty Rhodes, he's the guy that wrote the book. I think when he was writing the book, he was living in Houston. He was
Mhm.
thriving on them. Now, also too, these desert species, um, keep in mind as well, you know, their microclimate, even like if they're crepuscular when they come out, like a senicolus, typically, is like crepuscular. So the humidity levels are different, and also when they're in those rock crevices or underground, the microclimate, the humidity is a lot higher than we think. It's not like 10%. Um, so I think that also needs to be taken into account as well. Is that like
Right.
it's not like always bone dry.
Yeah.
So sometimes it is like again, like we can't predict everything when an animal's out and about, but um, I I I I always think about the microclimate too, and a lot of these animals in desert environments are not being kept bone dry all the time. They would simply desiccate and perish.
Yeah, I always feel bad for Gila monsters and a
Oh,
lot of zoo exhibits where they're under bright lights, and I mean, most of the time they're underground or in a,
yeah,
humid microenvironment.
exactly. So, uh, you know, yes, do question everything. Um, I always do. I do like a challenge, and I'll tweak things up. I'm very in tune to the rhythm, the NPR guys, the rhythm of the room, and if something is acting off, I'll just keep an eye on it, and then I'll proceed to make changes as needed. I don't always make them right away because I want to continue to observe, and then I'll react if needed. But I don't want to panic. I mean, that's a lot of times people do that early on. They're keeping, then you realize, okay, let me just give it time. Let me try a couple things out, and if this doesn't work, then we'll go about doing something different or making modifications, assuming it's a husbandry related issue and not a disease related issue.
Right.
Um, but a lot of times that goes hand in hand, husbandry and disease, like we already spoke about. So um, I think just, I try to do OBS. We call observations. I just call OBS. That's a lab animal term. We do OBS on our animals every day, health checks. And I also just do that on my animals as well. So I try to very much stay in tune about their behaviors, what they're doing, their presentation, their body posture, their breathing, their overall mentation. It's just these things I don't even think about because I'm so accustomed to doing it now for many years of, my patients from day one. I was a veterinarian. They don't talk to you. So you have to use your physical exam, which guides a majority of your diagnosis and the behaviors of the animal to draw conclusions or speculation from that. So, and that takes time. Um, and you will fail, and that's okay. Sometimes it's just not your fault either. And yeah, don't be too hard on yourself unless you spend 10 grand on an animal and then it dies. And yes, I would be hard on myself. So, but I'm not
Yeah,
doing
fair.
fair enough.
That being said, right, being in having those different ambient conditions is going to potentially change the challenges that you have to sort of modify your behavior to reflect, right? So that in a more humid environment, you're more likely to have, excuse me, might survive, right? Whereas, excuse me, in my ambient conditions, for the most part, right, to the extent that in the mite episode they talked about mites looking for ambient humidity at least in the 30s. If my room ambient humidity is in the mid-teens, they won't even survive in those conditions. They desiccate.
Yeah, they desiccate. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a nice thing to have. Nice problem. I guess it's not really a problem, but it's nice when you're in a drier environment and don't have to really worry as much about mold and mites and things of that nature. But also you have to be aware that if you're keeping tropical species that like your Puerto Rican boas, for example, Rob, Puerto Rico is a lot different than Colorado in terms of humidity and precipitation levels. You might have to make some adjustments, but they can still be made. I mean, I forgot his name, but there's a big Amazon basin breeder
Steve Volk, yeah.
and that is totally different than the Amazon basin. But he's successful because he's been able to manipulate his conditions for those animals to thrive, and it is possible. And again, when you're in a controlled environment, it's different. Now, my humidity levels will never be as low as yours are, but when my room, again, like I keep my Gobi right here, it's 50% in this room right now. I mean, that's not like a terribly high humidity level. So that's what all these animals are exposed to. And if it's a more tropical species, the substrate I'll use would be Reptile chip. I'll give them some humid hides. If they're not tropical, then I won't do that. But again, we adapt, and you just adapt to the conditions that these animals require, and go from there.
And there are certain species, right, that are more or less adaptable to those things. I even think in the context of blood pythons, blood and short-tail pythons, that those I've always found, presumably it reflects both their physiology and where they've evolved, is that the conditions are relatively consistent in terms of temperature, humidity, those sorts of things, that when they're young animals, in general, they'll do fine in sort of a human room temperature plus external heating. Whereas once they get large enough that they can't really get to operating, temperature 78 to 82, based on sitting on that external heating pad or the light or whatever sort of mechanism people would use, those do a ton better when they're in an ambient 78 to 82 room, as opposed to a diamond python that does best when kept in human conditions with access to a spotlight that'll go to the mid 80s or upper 80s.
And also cooler too for diamond. So like I have a friend of mine who gives quite a bit of diamond pythons here, and his room, then again, is cool. It's like the low 70s, and he does very well with them. So, you.
And in that room, blood pythons would not do well. I guess that's sort of the point, right? There are things that sort of fit either your conditions, meaning your hyper-specific room conditions, or even just your keeping style.
The microenvironment and the macro, right? Comes down to that. Justin, are you drier by you than Rob? Like your rooms? I know you keep a lot of arid Australian species, and they love Utah.
Right. And I think it maybe is a little bit drier, not maybe too much worse, but similar to Rob, but maybe a little bit on the drier side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you add moisture to the room, either in terms of a humidifier? Justin, Justin,
No.
are you adding room or you're spraying?
No, mostly it's like, the enclosures, kind of managing it from the enclosure side. If I have one that needs a little more humidity, then I'll, make sure it's a open, front opening enclosure with solid top and sides and things like that. But
Are you seeing that in an animal by animal or a species by species or
more species
both?
by species, yeah. But I mean, I did get a few of the um, the dubia roaches enclosures with the screen tops, but I usually put something over top so it keeps the relative humidity within there, and I'll have hide boxes and things like that that can
What do
give
you
them
like,
that.
Justin? What do you like covering those dubia tops with?
Just usually, a box or a sheet of, something else that, usually the foam padding that comes in the box with the enclosure, I'll
Okay,
just cut that out into the size of the top and,
this is
you know,
snakes, so
yeah,
nothing
yeah, mostly
requires
snakes.
UVB or heat lamp. Okay,
No, not
okay,
necessarily. I mean, they can use it, but yeah, they don't typically give them much UVB.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose you kind of bring it up there, Chris, and I'm curious on your take on this situation. So we've entered a space, particularly with snakes, right? Exactly what Justin said there of, oh, they could use it. I'm concerned that people overdo that and sort of that there's an equal risk, right? So if we're in a space where we're
Right.
saying, if we're talking about species that have been bred in racks without access to UVB for literal decades, and then people just said, there's a shift within the hobby of there's an expectation that everything be provided UVB, and people aren't really doing that in a conscious way, that they
Mhm,
can definitely overdo it and seriously injure or
absolutely,
kill their animals.
yes, they can. Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, I think it just depends on if you wanna just talk about snakes, it it really just depends on the natural history and biology of that species. If, if they are a more diurnal animal, um, it might be, I could see it being just more justified. Now there's been studies, I think Dr. Mitchell did it on LSU about leopard geckos, which, um, I think there's leopard geckos, some type of gecko, that was mainly nocturnal, and they were still able to, um, there were still differences between control group and experimental group when it came to UVB. But with that being said, and I, I, there are risks associated with UVB. Um, you know, they it it depends. Everything depends on the output, right? So, you've you can UVB could cause free radicals and could cause you know tumors too if too high of a dose. It could also affect the eyes of an animal. It could cause pretty significant keratitis, inflammation of the cornea. You have to be careful with it. You just can't slap like a um, high output
6.0 desert, yeah, or
mm,
12.0 desert bulb on.
on like a a species that is not accustomed to that sort of wavelength and
Right.
expect it to be fine. So
A 12.0 on a Loxocemus with no high box, right?
yeah,
Like you're gonna have
exactly.
problems
So
very
there
shortly.
you won't be getting any sorts of UVB. That's for sure. I mean, the only UVB, none of my snakes have it. I, there are benefits though. I mean, especially if it's like a diurnal species, or even I've considered like with Senecolas too, because I had a good friend of mine who's a veterinarian in Arizona had one of his Senecolas died from a dystocia, so she didn't pass eggs. And his husbandry was very good, but I always wondered if UVB, because it obviously has a huge effect on calcium,
Mhm.
if that would help potentially reduce the risk of dystocia in an animal that you may be more crepuscular or diurnal. But I don't
Yeah,
know. As far as I know, I don't think many studies have been done on that. But that'd be interesting. But yes, I would caution. Not everything needs UVB. Um,
Mhm.
in terms of snakes. Snakes are obligate carnivores, so their calcium uh, metabolism is different than that of an obligate herbivore, like a turtle, tortoise, or lizard. So you just have to be aware of that.
Right. I just got the solarometer earlier this year, so I've been kind of
Yeah, I have.
comparing things like that. But I went and so I checked my UV lamp on the lizard cages, and it was not putting out anything. And so I had a spare bulb on hand, so I changed it out, and then it was up to like 6 to 12, depending on how close to the source you were. And then I went outside, and it was maybe early spring, and I checked the UV outside, and it was like 3 or 2. It was pretty low, depending on the cloud cover and the angle of the sun and things. But I'm sure that increases as the summer wears on and things like that. But yeah, I
That
mean,
summer, no clouds. Sure.
yeah, huge difference between that UV
And they
bulb
don't
and
even like obligate herbivorous reptiles. They don't like. There's been studies too. Again, Dr. Mitchell has shown that you don't need like when they look at the D3 levels. You don't need it like all the time. Like even just a
right,
couple times a week or a
right,
couple hours a day are
yeah,
sufficient. Not 12 hours.
yeah,
And more research is coming out about that. And I love it, and I
mhm,
think it's just going to drive the hobby, drive the field, drive the captive care and husbandry
right,
for these animals. I wish more was done with snakes, and it is, but
mhm,
historically, the UVB conversation was a lot of our herbivorous reptiles, and but more is coming out with snakes from the hobbyist side. But again, like I said, there are dangers with skin lesions and potentially cancers and
Yeah.
eye issues and uh,
right,
a lot of other things that I don't think people consider. But always, really, like you said, invest, especially with these animals if they're high dollar. And I know the solar meters they're quite pricey, but they are worth the investment if you have a lot of animals
right,
using that, a UVB bulb. So
And while we're there, so a thing that's a group that seems like a good candidate would be Masticophis, and that brought to mind
yeah,
the interesting question.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but while we're there, right, the interesting question of buttermilk racers, and you're in the state you live in now, right?
Mhm.
And the idea of people seeing tumors in association with older animals that have more of that white pigment, and that really
Well, yeah,
kind of
that's
neatly fits into the box of the whole idea, right? That
mm,
mutation animals, your albino cow king, might be a particularly poor candidate for UVB over the top of the enclosure.
exactly, and it affects their eyes big time. Those albinism, a lot of animals do not like light. Albino animals like
right,
infrared light at all. They're very photosensitive. That's the proper term. Um, and the lighter animals, like you said, that's not, yes, in the buttermilk racers they've been seeing, but anything with white, like you see this all the time in certain breeds of cattle that are white, they're at much higher risk of squamous cell carcinomas. Also, with dogs, lighter colored dogs are at risk of cutaneous hemangiosarcomas, which can be due to UV light. If they're kept outdoors or have a lot of outdoor exposure, being in the mountains where you guys are, people with Pyrenees and everything, high elevations, going on hikes. I mean, the UVB levels up on peaks, 14,000-foot peaks are strong. I mean, they're dangerously strong. And if you're always exposed to that, yeah, I mean, for human especially, wear protection. I mean, there's a lot of people that even me too. I was surprised, quite a few people that I know personally, a few vets too, have gotten basal cell carcinomas from strong sun exposure here. So you got to protect yourself. And again, I know I'm talking about human medicine now in a way, but
well, and that too, I mean, I think
or
people
not.
people
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just, in regards to that, like, I was just at the dermatologist with my daughter, and we were talking about skin cancer and, sun exposure and things.
On
But
the
I
rise,
think
man.
we've kind of gone the other way too because of the fear of skin cancer. Now people aren't getting enough sunlight and they're having, vitamin D
Vitamin D.
deficiencies,
Well,
which
go
can
to the
have its own
Northwest.
challenges.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I lived in the Pacific Northwest for 3 years. I think probably
Yeah.
majority of that population has D3 deficiency.
I think the majority of any population anywhere, that especially if they're wearing a lot of sunscreen or not going outside. And he said, it's a measured exposure. If you're going out regularly, I mean, that's what a tan is, right? Is that melanin coming in to absorb those harmful rays and protect your cells or your DNA from being damaged, which is kind of the root of or cause of cancer, right? You mutate the wrong place in your DNA, which is kind of keeps the cells growing properly and stopping growing. More importantly, when you knock out that, then your cells grow unchecked, and then that's
You're more likely to get a sufficient dose with less time in the sun if you have more of your body exposed. Now, I'm not
right.
saying to go outside walking around naked because you don't want your private parts to get burned, but the more of your body is exposed, like with your shirt off and your short shorts on, the more D3 you will be
Right.
absorbing, than if you're on like a long sleeve shirt and just your head is exposed in long pants, which honestly I do. Being down south with the bug burden down here and just the sun as well. Anytime I'm in the field, whether it's herping or birding, I'm always wearing long sleeve, long pants. I
Right.
wear a hat. I just don't like getting bit, but I just don't like getting burned either. So
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, it kind of what you just said, right, is reminiscent of the idea of keeping varanids, which I think maybe you do right behind you. That would be my guess
well,
as to what's.
those are Carusia. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
Um,
I don't keep varanids. They're cool, but
A lot of work.
they're a lot of they're high maintenance for me, man. I
Yeah.
I I think they're awesome. If you had the setup, the facilities, they're super cool. I mean, the smaller ones, like, the Kimberley rocks and everything. Justin, I think you have some Australian varanids, but
I used to. I don't have any
okay,
currently. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
kept a couple different kinds. They're
you
cool.
know, I've always had this thing, and just I don't mind the herbivores. I don't mind the snakes, but the varan their metabolism is just so much higher, even though a lot of them are carnivores.
Mhm.
Some are, you look at the Grays monitor, but that no one has those except zoos. But they like they eat like fruits and veggies and
Yeah.
stuff. But they're just more any like the insect eaters. I just don't like dealing with insects. My wife is a vet too, but she doesn't like. They're just insects are a pain in the ass to me. And by all means, I have people that work with them. That's cool and all, but I don't want to deal with insect eaters.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, the thought process with that, right, relative to the UVB concentration or D3 concentration idea is the idea, right, of using a bank of lights rather than using a single light. If you have sort of a larger size lizard, Odatria, you're probably fine to get away with using a single light that it's going to expose it to warm up its entire body. But if you have a savanna monitor that's too big, you have this concentrated spot of light and it's trying to elevate its entire body temperature utilizing that one spot, then you're going to get a burn associated because it's going to sit too long in that same spot, right? That was the thing that jumped to mind as you went into that conversation.
Or disconnecting the heat and the UV, like having it, they
Yeah.
need to be in conjunction with each other rather than.
Historically, and there was, it was like, yeah, you do need a little heat for proper UVB. Um, like, and then subsequently D3 uptake and everything. Like, there needs to be a heat element involved as well. I don't really like for every species is different, and I don't know like the levels on that. I'm not like at what temperature and at what wavelength of UVB does an animal need to optimize their UVB uptake and subsequent D3 production. I don't really know. I don't think many. I don't. I don't think I'm sure it's variable depending on the species. For example, like my Carusia here, and a lot of people provide them with some heat too. My room does get pretty warm during the day, not smoking hot, but it gets, the low 80s. I don't even have a heat lamp in there. I do have a UVB in case they want to use it. They don't. They're because they are nocturnal. They're usually in their cork bark most of the day. But sometimes I catch them under there, and that's great. But they're able to escape that if needed with the cork barks, or they go under the substrate sometimes. Like there's like a little mat that I have that they go under. So yeah. Anyway, it's very, very interesting conversation. A lot more research is going into it. Yeah, I don't think every snake needs UVB, and just be cautious with it. Learn, do as much research as you can on the natural history of the animal and make your best judgment from the literature, from the books that are out there, which I'm a big fan of, and also from experienced keepers. Don't always believe what you read on Facebook groups.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Let's jump into a couple other topics that had come up on the snakes and stogies. One of them, you brought up an interesting concept around the idea of whether we have obligations to work with species as captives, right? There's a lot of conversation around, like, should we. Essentially, I do think we're with the reduction in diversity of wild-caught animals that's happened over the last 5 or 10 years in captivity. Do we have an obligation to work with those things that, quote, when they come in, or on that rare instance that they do? Ideas around whether there are species that are better suited to common captive conditions or not. Whether things, we've on NPR had previously framed that as there are just species that are difficult, or quote, they suck, or whatever, that just are difficult captives and don't necessarily. It's not that the common refrain is, oh, no one cared, and that often understates sort of the difficulty associated with some of the particularities of some.
Yeah, I think it really truly depends on the gosh, this is vague in the fact that every species is so different. Some will come in and they'll never establish themselves because, one, maybe they're too old, Rob, like some older Senecolis that don't like to adapt. Maybe if you get them younger, that's better. Or, like, for example, Calibars, right? Calibars have been coming in. They're super cheap. I'm telling you, one day those things are not going to come in anymore, and they're going to jack up in price. But the wild caught ones, especially, are mainly adults, and they are difficult to establish. However, some people have been very successful with them. I will say, one of the first snakes I got back into 4 or 5 years ago, because again, I've always kept, but in terms of numbers this big, it started when I moved into my house here in Louisiana, because I finally was able to purchase and own a home. I couldn't do that for many years because of school and moving, renting, I had picked one up, and, just like a lot of people, it didn't do well. It was partially my fault as well, but, they can be difficult to establish, but then again, you can get lucky, and sometimes some of these animals will come and grab it, and you will hit a gold mine if you could potentially get gravid animals to successfully lay eggs or give birth, in which then these animals, young animals, now we're looping back to Senecolis, they haven't, if they're born in captivity, they don't know anything about the wild, so those stressors are reduced in a way. I recently got 2 captive bred Calibars, and those things are amazing. Just young again, babies, I got them as, and they're doing fine. No issues at all. So, yeah, it really just depends on the animal. Like, I guess when I was talking about that, I was talking about, like, on snakes and togies, like, example, like an animal like a rainbow snake, something that specialized that eats eels for the most part. I just don't, and also protected in a lot of states too, but it's just not a good animal to keep in captivity. And even a mud snake, which I have down here, there are a few zoos that do keep them, and they're especially ones I've read some PhD student. I can't remember if it was Southeastern Louisiana State or someone did their dissertation on them, and the mud snake did give birth. They collected the mud snake in like May or June. It was gravid. It gave birth, and they were able to like use amphiumas and scent, I think, mice or something with it, and they did take. Um, but again, if you a wild caught mud snake from southeast Louisiana, you just snatch it off the road and put it out of captivity, it might be difficult to
Right.
get those things going because I don't know many people that keep amphiumas. They will eat other, sirens and other amphibians. That's kind of what I'm
That
talking about.
really broadens it out. Not
There
just
is there's
amphiumas, but sirens as well.
a little, yeah. It's just like there's just stuff that they're just so specific dietary requirements that you're never going to be able to replicate that or have access
Right.
to that. So, for the sake of the animal, I don't, I don't know if it's really worth it. And also, mud
Or,
snake
or
not that low, but
right.
like rainbow snakes, for example, or some states they are pretty rare and hard to
Mhm.
find. And yeah, probably best to avoid keeping something like that. But go ahead.
Or at least target something closer to their natural diet rather than scenting mice with amphiumas, maybe scent
Yeah,
like frog legs or something like you know,
yeah.
get them
Then
something closer to what they would eat in the
I
wild.
think again, I think 'cause if a younger animal, I think you potentially might have a shot. I just think the older these animals are, this is variable. It depends on the species, but the more sensitive species, the more specialized species, the older they are, the higher stressors they're going to experience coming just,
Right.
the whole life. Maybe for 5, 10 years they've been out in the wild. Now they're in your vivarium. It can be tough. And again, this is so species specific because
Right.
I said, like my Loxocemus that I have, they, like I said, we get the shipment in, I throw them in the cage. I've literally fed them the same day. They're fresh off the plane and they're eating. And I'm like, holy hell. So again, they're fine. That's one species. That's not, you know,
Right.
not every, a Calabar, I don't think it's going to do that.
Mhm.
but, but again, Calibars can get established. Sometimes they can adapt.
Right? Are they really just West African rubber bows?
I don't know. And I love my rubber. Now you got me going. Yeah, talk about, oh yeah, Louisiana. Well, I love my rubbers. I have quite a few rubbers. Those are like my favorite snakes. I need to go herping with you guys in Utah because I need to get that off my life list.
Yeah.
That's just an amazing animal to me. I'm totally obsessed with them. I think they are, yeah, they're brown, but they're beautiful snakes. I love their natural history. I like how you could find them. They're just so cold tolerant. You could find them like
Mhm.
on snowbanks in like March in the high elevations, just like
Yeah.
sucking up the sun and warming up. And they're seasonal feeders, so they're like Sambos in a way where I mean they could go a year and barely drop any body weight, when their body condition score is still good without eating. So.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
they're cool snakes.
I mean, some of the stuff I have is high maintenance. Some of the stuff I have is lower maintenance. I do, just my career, personal life, I do like lower maintenance animals overall. So
Yeah.
I will take them. They're great.
Mhm. Well, are there some species that you think are being under, that should deserve more of a
Potentially
spotlight
good
or
candidates that you're
attention?
exposed to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would adapt well, but that are underrepresented.
Well, yeah, and I was talking about this in Justin's, and I brought up many times in this podcast too. Those Loxocemus, I'm telling you,
Mhm.
they are very underrepresented. They don't always come in. It just depends on the year, but I think they make great captives. They don't musk, they don't bite, they eat well. Um,
Mm.
like I'm seeing one now running around his cage because he's hungry, but
Mm.
they're fantastic, fantastic snakes.
So
I
they're not the empty cage syndrome animals that I hear sometimes described as. They're out and about.
depends on the time of day. I mean, if you
Right.
come at noon, they're not going to be out, but now this time of day, the sun's down and they're out and about.
Cool.
I I think they're fantastic. I mean, that's the one that I really I have quite a good size little breeding group now.
Mhm.
They take a while to sexually mature,
Right.
but they're really cool.
Well, they've had an interesting captive history, right? So if you look at literature from the 80s through the early 90s. I think they were principally coming out of Mexico, and then that closed. And so they were a really high status animal, right? A lot of the pictures and records from were in zoo collections, things like that. And they basically went through a fallow period of basically being unavailable with a few stragglers that are around, because it seems like they do have the potential to live for a really long time. And then within the last 10, 12 years, something like that, they opened up a quote on them for Nicaragua. And the interesting part of that is that I'd seen that on the CITES list. I talked to Cameron, so that
they're Appendix 2. They're Appendix 2 animals.
right. And so the part that was interesting is that a quota opened from Nicaragua to get them. But I talked to Cameron, and he said, I have no context there. There's no infrastructure. There's no on the very front end when they first issued that quota. He said, well, that's great, dude, but I don't have any way to actually get there's no one for me to talk to get them. So that infrastructure took several years to build out, and then they started coming in. There's a guy who is he a ball Markey? Josh Markey, I think, was kind of the first one to start. Somehow he got a conduit, so the infrastructure to get those animals. So he started getting them, and we actually had an influx into captivity. So it wasn't just the Mexico stuff; those started, and then they went out back and some of the other sort of the more normative sources for importing and things. So obviously the infrastructure built. It was almost like the quota preceded the infrastructure to send them out, and then now that's subsequently been developed, and it is a thing that went from being super high end to through the fallow period. Sort of, we've seen that with plenty of things, even Carusha, as you say. And then now they are readily available, but you're probably, right, that is that spigot turned on before the infrastructure existed. It's probably going to turn off before the infrastructure stops existing.
Yes, exactly. I think it will turn off at some point, but hey, I'm riding the high, man. Buy them while they're low, because they're like stocks,
Right.
because then they're gonna.
If you have faith in them, then you might as well buy them when they're.
Might as well. I'm already committed. Already got money into them. So
And if you like them, yeah,
I do like them. Again,
yeah.
Pretty low maintenance.
I
well.
think that's a common thread with a lot of these imports is people don't get them because the imports are so low cost that they're like, well, if I breed these things, that's a lot of effort to sell them at import prices. I think you can get, probably double what or more what an importer's asking for a captive bred animal if there's a demand and if people are excited about them. But sometimes it's a little hard to compete. Why spend, $200 when you can spend $50 and get a wild caught animal, I think is, a common thought process, even though they're going to maybe lose that animal a lot faster than they would a captive bred, in the U.S. Animals. So.
Exactly.
Well, and while we're in this space, but still on the Carusha, it's interesting. I would think that just being snakes as opposed to Carusha that have a baby or twins annually. A funny thing to me was always the idea that, oh, well, Carusha used to be disposable. They used to be super inexpensive, all this stuff. And I think sometimes we then fail to acknowledge that was probably wrong in the first place. Those were only easily available in those habitats because so much time had allowed that population to build up at their reproductive capacity. That was never the true price. We had just externalized the cost on the environment and said, oh, well, I could easily go collect 50 of them. But that was the effort of 20 animals over 3 years or whatever to do that. And they never should have been $70. That was never the true cost. It was their externalized cost. We're probably closer within this Loxocemus of saying, well, they probably, annually they're having 5, 6, 7, 8 offspring, whatever it is. So it's maybe they can be cheap. But it's just, with your interest in that, I always want to bring that up and have to take your thought.
What is the true cost? We make it, right? It's like that's made up. It's supply and demand. But I mean,
but when the supply actually represents 5 years of reproductive output for that island, and we were able to collect it in a month, but that doesn't mean that it can be replenished in a month. And
exactly. And thankfully, I mean, Carusha now they've reproduced pretty readily in captivity if you have the right pairing. I mean, they are, one of the few social reptiles, and they do live in family groups.
But still sort of in that shingleback spot of like,
Right.
okay, so if they're completely cut off and we're again in that space of saying, okay, if you get some activity from your pair and you get that one baby for the year, you, given the family group dynamic that you talk about, you're probably not going to be too keen to send that out, let alone to send out
No.
multiples from it, all those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. It's I guess it depends on your goals too. I mean, if you're gonna be some people just want them as a pet, which is fine. Other people wanna breed them and make money off of them. Also the social dynamic of the group itself. I mean, they don't all get along, they're like humans. So if you have a pair that's not compatible, then crap, you might be shit out of luck. But if you do have a pair that's compatible and they're both doing well and thriving, there's no reason to split that group off unless maybe your goals are, again, if your goal is to produce, then that's fine. But if not, that's okay too. So I
Mhm.
think it just, yeah, it's very it's a you could approach that in many different angles.
Mhm.
Justin, do you have single backs?
I wish that would be great, but they're just have have typically been out of my price range no
I know
matter,
they're one of the
how
spacey.
much they were.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Not many people work with them, and they fetch such a high
Yeah.
price. They're gorgeous.
And it is kind of funny because you go over to South Australia at the right time of year. I mean, we saw 40 of them in the wild and in the right time of year. They were, I mean, the guys are like, "Why are you stopping? We've seen like 30 of those." I'm like, "I don't care. I'm going to stop for every single one of these things.
Yeah,
They're
that's
just too cool."
that's always
And I think if that was the case, and all of a sudden Australia said, "Hey, we're going to allow some exports," and shinglebacks are $500, and I'd probably maybe buy up 20 of them or something, and over time, and have a big group and try to get several pairs that could produce. But otherwise, if just have a pair or something, it's
so. Um,
unless you just really want them and you have $20,000 burning a hole in your pocket, there's not much sense to it because
It's
you're
yeah,
not
not a
gonna be able to
project.
have
Yeah.
babies
forget
and
that. Forget that.
yeah.
I mean, I know they're super. How many people do you know that work with them here in the States?
There's a few. I mean, I've talked to maybe 5 or 6 people that have bred them, and that's just people that I've come across. We went and visited a
We
facility
saw
that
a
had.
very impressive collection
Yeah,
of,
and he's producing, a few,
yeah,
several a year and doing really well with them. Has them pretty much figured out. So, hopefully we'll see the increase in the availability, but yeah, I think the supply is not going to come close to the demand. I
Yeah.
think the biggest opportunity I had, I probably would have got fired for it, but there, there was one at the Herp building at the university,
Mhm.
and it was kept in a wood box with no lights, and I was like so tempted just to take it, because like I would give it a good home, and I was just really frustrated to see that, but
What did they? Was it just like a teaching animal, or what were they?
no, it was a confiscation. For some reason, they'd given it to the university, and you would think they would try to do a better job, but yeah, it was like, and it died, not too long after that, and I'm like, what a waste, what a waste.
impressive to be able to mistreat a shingleback sufficiently
Yeah,
to kill it within a short
yeah,
period of time. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right,
Under impressive, yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But what do you do? I think if it was now, I probably would really press, like, "Give me that animal. This is inhumane," like, "You
Yeah.
guys are I'm gonna call the
Or do
authorities,"
better.
yeah, or do better. Yeah.
Yeah. While we're in this space, Chris, the last thing from the Snakes and Stogies was kind of the same conversation, but within the context of ESA listed species. I don't know if you have sort of any differential thoughts within that context.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about the native listing and the non-native listings. I I, I could talk about it for a while, and I don't want to piss some people off because I could go on a soapbox and I could get emotional about it. I'll try to stay professional. Um, Now the ESA, I think for like our native species, let's just say as an act, it has benefited some animal. I mean, look at the American alligator, for example, right? I mean, historically, was very low numbers. Now it's like they're abundant everywhere. I mean, I think Louisiana actually has the highest population density.
Mhm.
Uh,
Bald eagles,
but
California condors, like all sorts of
so yeah,
things.
like
Wolves. Yeah.
I get it, and I also there is an economic impact though for people that
Right.
might utilize that land that does need to be, considered. Okay, so like, um, it's not like I think just with the public because oh yeah, let's protect everything and yeah, it's all hunky dory and whatever, and that that's dangerous because they're not. You have to. It could also affect a listing can affect people as well. I
Mhm.
don't want that to I don't want people to overlook that because there is an economic impact, and whether or not you like it or not, we need money to survive. I don't care, how anyone puts it, we all need an income, we all need to live on something, so if the listing of a species, impacts,
Well,
um
maybe particularly when and maybe this is a dichotomy you're drawing, but the thing that jumps to mind with that, right, is so McCrae on Batanta. So we're talking about listing a species that doesn't live in the United States. We're
so, yeah,
applying
that's
our prejudice.
that's where I was actually going
Yeah,
was that part. I don't like, the non-native protections is
it's an active industry, and we're
where
saying
I am like, I just see that really having more detriment than help because again, it look for example, turtle and tortoise world, because this is where it is something that really pissed a lot of people off, and understandably so, was like the listing of the Egyptian tortoise a few years back. I mean, they haven't been legally imported into this country in decades. It's been like since the 90s.
Mhm. You
The
can't hardly find them in the wild anyway.
USA
Like there's
they're doing it does nothing for habitat protections in
Mhm.
Egypt, Libya, southern Israel, where they're native to. Um, unfortunately, so that's under what they call was it section 4D? That's the that's it's like the 4D rule. Um, that's where they're like protected under. And unfortunately, the federal government just doesn't consider hobbyists or herpetoculturalists. They don't believe in the invisible arc. They don't believe that we have anything to do with conservation, that's actually what irritates me a lot. And I'll keep it professional, but that's where they get it really wrong and they need to restructure some of these laws because um there in fact is we do have a role in protection, and we do have a role in captive propagation if it's done ethically. There are good people in this hobby, and unfortunately, just all the negative press portrays us as bad. But we need to start focusing on the beneficial and positive aspects of keeping the Egyptian tortoise, for example. Um, like, well, actually, we were talking about that, but like, let's just say, like, there's so much knowledge sharing too when it comes to this. And look at if you want to talk about snakes too. I mean, look at the barkers. I mean, they were the first ones to produce like 12 python species that no one had ever produced in the world. And you could use that knowledge to benefit zoos and private keeping and also share that to propagate species that may be imperiled in the wild. Um, I have because I did it can get confusing, but like I just think that also like you create a genetic bottleneck, especially if it's like a 4D listing where you can no longer sell them. So some people are just like, well, I can only sell within state. I don't want to gift, and maybe they just have one or two species. Well, they can't like if that's it, like their income that they use to propagate and all the husbandry that's involved could be like totally slashed. And you're just creating a genetic bottleneck
within
essentially
that state, right,
within
within
that
that
state.
jurisdiction.
Yeah, within not every state's equal. I mean, like, yeah, you have giant states like Florida and California and stuff like Texas, okay, maybe, but like in a smaller state, yeah, that's not helping at all. Um, so I just it also doesn't like it, it doesn't do anything for like poaching, smuggling outside the U.S. Like nothing. I get so the reason why they do is because they want to like prevent the laundering, right, of these species. They want to
Right. It's
prevent.
trying to remove the gray.
Yes,
The gray market.
and I get that because that is a problem, and the biggest smugglers in the world historically have always done that, and I understand it. But there needs to be more. There needs to be a balance here, and this is just I think this is really detrimental for genetic diversity, for genetic bottlenecking, for people who do use these animals for sale historically. Now they can't eat, if again, if you don't if you
And if
work
you're removing that value, right? So say in the context of Batanta, if Macrae is listed, okay, right now, there actually has been an expansion, as we've seen with Nick and Ryan going over there and that sort of stuff. There has been an expansion into sort of the ecotourism angle, right? So in that specific example, there's still some utility to them. But if you're
Mhm,
talking about like that ecotourism was born of the collectors, right, who gained knowledge about how to find them based on collecting them for the industry. And the whole idea has been, right, if we're in particularly when we're talking about third world conditions, as you talk about, people really just looking to survive,
mhm,
the utilization of those resources will take one form or another. And if we're removing the fiscal value of those animals, then we're risking that they'll be eaten. We've seen, I mean, the Malcolm Douglas, right, was sort of the proto Steve Irwin. Even earlier, you can still see some of that stuff on YouTube. But he went out with indigenous folks in Western Australia, much closer to the border. This would fit into the Justin's iNaturalist. There are no records from this, 200 square mile area or whatever, but they're out, in the red center, but in WA area with no roads, these sorts of things. And this is the late 80s, early 90s. So we're talking about a Woma that would have a U.S. commercial value of $8,000, $10,000. The most beautifully clean banded, even banded orange on cream Woma that you can imagine. And because the utility to the indigenous people there was as meat, they crack it over the head and eat it for the $5 worth of meat that it is. When that if there was a conduit at a capacity for that to be exported, that's $10,000 versus $5 worth of meat. That's
mhm.
literally the difference based on those market factors.
exactly, exactly. I think that's a great point. Um, I I'm not going to be the one that fixes that issue. This needs to be spearheaded by the industry, the herpetoculturists themselves. Unfortunately, we like piece ourselves out as, oh yeah, you do turtles and tortoises. Oh yeah, you do snakes, you do lizards. But really, it's an industry as a whole. I would love it if they were able to, it really needs to be updated. And that the captive bred wildlife permit or whatever, that's impossible to get. No one, but they make exceptions though for like you know, um, like public institutions, zoos, and everything. Um,
Even that's really
and
tough though with in ESA listed species in particular, right? So the example that I have the greatest clarity into goes to Jamaican boas,
yeah,
and
yes,
even for Audubon, say, to
but
get
they're threatened though.
Jamaican boas.
Sorry, Rob, not there. They're I so the Egyptian tourists, I believe the ESA, they're threatened under the 4D, but
Not endangered. Yeah,
The Jamaican boas are considered endangered, which is
it's
even
a whole nother level status of
stronger
differentiation. Yeah,
protections than. But go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. The I guess the point that jumped out to me is saying like, oh, we typically view it as sort of haves and have-nots, and we're framing ourselves within herpiculture as being within that have-not box. Oh, the public institutions have capacity to sort of act despite the ESA, and they can transact, not in a monetary, but in a, it's easy enough for them to. When we're talking about ESA listed species, even institutions have a difficult time managing that, and it does often come down to sort of the whim or feeling of a particular inspector or employee or whatever, and they have a lot of discretion within that space. So that I know, get it in terms of importing European line subflavus into the U.S., that even public institutions here, it took them like 4 tries to be able to get one shipment.
Yeah, it's
Just
great.
based on the discretion. Yeah, it's wild.
And because again, yeah, like they're the endangered, which I was, like you said, more protections, but um, I just it's depressing. It's
Yeah, it is sort of a cynical or negative space for sure. How about, I know we're eating a bunch of your time.
no, you're good.
What can you share on the indigo stuff?
Oh, um, so yeah, that was actually just like accepted for publication. So I can talk about it. So that was very, very cool. So this is flashback to 2024. That the Arab conference that year was in New Orleans, coincidentally. So I attended that, and I met quite a few people there, one of which was Dr. Bogan, James Bogan at the Central Florida Zoo. He's the director for Orion Society of Indigo Conservation. He's like the crypto guru to Cryptos Serpentis, but also like Varana and he's doing a lot of the work, really spearheading the research behind that. And um, he's worked with Loafman before for some of his grad students doing some indigo work. So I had been I reached out to Zach, and then I also connected with Loafman. I was like, "Hey, like we should like do a project to have some funding." Like initially, we were gonna do something pretty small, small scale, and it just like blew up into this like super complex like project. But it ended up it's gonna be really good. So what we did, and there's so much going on in this paper that even I am like, whoa, like, how did I do this? But it wasn't, I'm going to get credit where credit is due because I was not the one that, I was the one that structured the project, but I was not the one that like did the analysis. So that credit is due to My Dog Labs, which is out in California. They're kind of a startup, but they really work a lot with veterinarians, and their whole thing is like the microbiome, whether it's skin microbiome, oral, um, gut, I guess, the gut, the oral cavity is the start of the GI tract, but um, they do a lot of the microbiome research, and they are able to take your data and uh, develop it into a format that is interpretable for someone like a veterinarian who, I'm not a biostatistician, I'm not in bioinformatics, I don't do that sort of thing. So what they were doing is they were looking at, we were interested in investigating the cloacal microbiome of eastern indigo snakes. And we had 3 groups. We had a wild group, we had a captive group, crypto negative, and then we had captive group, crypto positive, and it's crypto serpentis. We'll just call it crypto going forward because it's shorter and easier. And they're starting to crank out this newer technology that's been around in humans for a little longer. It's slowly coming out of vet med, but it's called shotgun metagenomics. So essentially it's like anything with DNA is sequenced. So it's like bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, um, what the hell else did we have? Viruses, DNA viruses. And we're just like, well, let's look at this cloacal microbiome. And again, the cloaca is like a shared space between, um, GI tract, reproductive, urinary. So it's like the final exit point of all the waste, essentially. And we analyze it, and really the goal of the project really is, it's less for herpetoculture, it's more for conservation. So like, how can we, and again, a lot of these wild snakes background, a lot of these wild snakes were, some were actually truly wild. But I think 16 were head started initially, bred at the zoo, then released, and then 4 were actually truly wild. But based on previous literature and some other reptile species, and even showing here, the coecal microbiome really wasn't significantly different in the head-started snakes that had been out in the wild for right around a year or more, compared to those 4 wild snakes in that were caught in like southern Florida. Um, and then, not only the wild, but we also looked at like, okay, how is crypto affecting the coecal microbiome of the, uh, you know, captive snakes, the crypto especially, like what is going on here? So, then we used, I'll try to keep it simple because the paper is very complicated, but it's about to be like, the production team is like sent me something today and it's all laid out and it's about to just be done. It's open access too on PLOS One, which is the journal. So it should be available soon. But then we use certain diversity metrics to analyze like the diversity between the study groups, and we found some really, really remarkable things. It was cool seeing like especially our alpha diversity, which is like diversity within an individual sample, like all those things combined. Our wild snakes were significant, had significantly more diversity compared to our captive groups. For the cloaca microbiome, which again, it's not, the cloaca is a shared space. You sometimes will get different microbes if it's like a fecal sample compared to a cloacal sample. Okay. But yeah, we were able to analyze very in-depth analysis and come up with all these different like bar plots, abundance plots of the like bacterial taxa involved, the fungal taxa, the protozoan taxa, the nematode taxa, the phage. All the viruses were actually just phages, which are just like bacterial phages specifically. A lot of them are like salmonella phages, but phages are like viruses that attack bacteria. So it's like this biological warfare going on in there. And I don't want to really confuse people, but it is slightly confusing with everything going on in this paper. But we were able to find some really cool things, and hopefully the goal is for conservationists and zoos and to use this, and maybe it could benefit Head Start programs that release captive bred animals back into the wild. Because if your gut microbiome, it's influenced by a lot of things. If your gut microbiome is pretty poor, you might not make it. You might fail to thrive. And at that point, if that animal's failing to thrive, why even release it out in the wild? Because it's going to do nothing and potentially shed pathogens because now it's immunosuppressed. A lot of pathogens in reptiles are opportunistic. So, it's could be a commensal, and then all of a sudden you have these immunosuppression. And I think this happens a lot in captivity, Senecolis. And then the balance is off and they end up succumbing to disease and die. So we had some, even our crypto-positive snakes, we had what they call like significant enrichment, which is just like the bacterial. Oh, sorry, no, it depended on. I'm sorry, depends on the bacteria, but there were certain bacteria we found that crypto-positive animals were significantly enriched with. It's really abundant, I should say, with Aeromonas and Edwardsiella, which are bacteria, and then like Trichosporon, which is a fungus, compared to our crypto-negative groups, captive groups. And there might be something going on there where that, potentially could be used in the future for, treatment options down the road whenever someone comes up with a good crypto treatment. Should we be targeting certain pathogens or not? We don't really know. But it's those Aeromonas, Edwardsiella, and Trichosporon are pathogenic and definitely cause disease in reptiles. And we saw that only like the significant enrichment or the significant abundance of those pathogens in our crypto positive animals, not crypto negative captive. And guess what? They're fed the same diet. So it's not the diet, it's something going, because actually at the zoo, they feed them, they rotate like with rats, mice, they actually do feed them some some fish, some frog legs. So, which, the fish, Edwardsiella and Aeromonas are actually historically fish pathogens. Those are also zoonotic pathogens as well. So it's just super in depth. I encourage you to look it over. You might need to use AI to break it down for you. It will simplify things. You'll be like, what the heck is going on here? Because it is overwhelming. But yeah, we found a lot of never before reported findings, and this was really the first project in snakes using shotgun metagenomic sequencing to assess their colloidal microbiome. And hopefully it'll be able to help, threatened or endangered species that are being head started elsewhere at zoos as well. Maybe we could use it for Louisiana pines, Rob. Who knows?
Now that's a very complex area. We did a little bit of micro or gene or the microflora environments work with. We were putting together a big program grant with that, and it seemed, I guess I'm curious on how you would envision constituting or reconstituting an environment that's more similar to a wild animal in a captive.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and that's where more research is needed. I think if you try to, your goal is to try to replicate, really, especially the ones that have lived in the wild for quite some time, like over a year or more. They're doing something right? And again, there's a lot of environmental factors in that, but if you could somehow replicate and use some sort of index or metric to replicate that, the microbiome in captives versus that in wild, you might have greater success long term for survivability.
Right.
Getting there, that's tough because you can't always, a lot of species you can't replicate what, like in Louisiana pines, for example. I mean, they just almost feed exclusively in pocket gophers, and I don't really know anyone producing pocket gophers.
Right.
But that's the next thing is how would you truly replicate it?
I mean, different methods that have been used somewhat. Well, I mean, it's not just the fact of adding some, like if this bacteria is in high proportion, just adding that bacteria, it depends on if it gets a foothold, if it there's a lot of things that can change the microgene or the microflora of the gut or wherever,
and it changes. Well, it's influenced by diet, environmental conditions, brumation,
right,
immune health status. So there's a lot of things. It's multifactorial. There's a lot of things going on, and it also is dependent on, I think, the species as well.
Right.
So, I think in terms of overall, you're trying to get a diverse microbiome. That's the goal.
Right.
But in terms of how do you replicate that? Because it's not just diet; it's all these other environmental factors as well, and those could change over time.
And but I mean, obviously, understanding it is the first step towards addressing it.
This is now an interest in mine, but I'm not a microbiologist. I give credit to my dog labs. They're the ones that really were the brains behind this, especially my collaborator. His name is Mark Jakob. He's just phenomenal. Him and I just worked so well together. And I always, whenever I talk about this project with people I know or at the university too, like with my boss, my supervisor, she's also about I just always want to give credit where credit is due because they were really the brains behind the analysis and everything. My job was actually pretty easy. I went out and found the indigos, the head started indigos, which they knew where they were basically, and we caught some and sample, which was great. I mean, they weren't they were head started, so we knew the area, we knew kind of where they would be, but still seeing an indigo in the wild was very special for me. And now I could say I've seen one.
Yeah, there you go. That's
cool.
Exactly where I was going is. Yeah. So did those count as finding one in the wild for your lifeless purposes?
They did. I'm gonna say they did because they do catch some out there that are truly wild as well. Now the ones that I found, I know were all head started, but some had been in the wild for a few years. There's other pathogens that are going, especially like, one thing, snake fungal disease is a real issue down here in Florida and is impacting them. We came across quite a few of them with SFD lesions. It's kind of sad. Um,
Yeah, so I have an interesting thought on that. So I've been rereading Snakes and Snake Hunting, Caulfield's book from 1957, and in there is a really interesting paragraph where he talks about he really is comparing sort of the eastern Getchla kings that he finds in the Pine Barrens and Lower Barrens and stuff like that versus a particular population in Virginia that he noticed always being sort of crusty and
yeah,
sort of unusual looking and things. And the thing that immediately jumped to my mind is we're talking here about SFD in a population in Virginia in the mid 1950s at the very latest, right? He's talking about
yeah,
experiences hunting from the 40s, 50s, things like that. And I always bring up to Justin as our resident virologist here the idea that, when we talk about serpentovirus and things, that us putting a name on something doesn't necessarily reflect, or being able to test for it doesn't necessarily reflect that it's actually new and novel within the space, right?
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And you see that a lot too in human medicine as well. But um, uh, gosh, I don't know if I should bring this up. I'm going to, but I'm not going to expand much in it. With the whole autism thing, I I'm just gonna say we've gotten better at testing for it than we did historically.
Right.
Justin, I'm sure I could really spike your blood pressure when you bring this vaccine conversation.
It's
Well,
Tylenol. That's the answer.
I
But
always put this out there. The guy who originally published that poorly done study, but suggesting that vaccines cause autism, was actually trying to sell a competing vaccine, and
yeah,
he
so
was trying
there
to
was already
imply that
a
the
bias involved here, which is not it's just
yeah,
poor
yeah.
science anyway. But
So he
uh,
wasn't like an anti-vaxxer. He
yeah,
was like,
it's,
no,
it's
buy my vaccine because it doesn't cause autism. Like,
yeah.
yeah,
So
right.
like, because I remember we're friends on Facebook. I remember some commenting like a year or two ago about this, like on your page, and you're like, I don't have time for this nonsense.
Right,
It's
right.
just like, get out of here with this. But the point, I don't want to go down that road. The point is that yeah, there is evidence now from museum specimens, everything that it has been likely around for quite some time. However, when you start fragmenting habitat and you start building, and I was talking about it in Justin's podcast. That's when you start seeing more and more of these diseases pop up because now we have
Right.
patchy zones and guess what? Smaller population sizes in these areas, disease is more likely to spread than if you had more robust and expansive areas where, yeah, it might be more in control. Because again, there's always going to be disease, there's always going to be balance.
Mhm.
Um, I just think
Or
because
even influenced by ecological factors, right? When we're talking about SFT, ability to expose to bask, right?
Mhm.
It plays a huge role
And
in the ability to both shed and to,
sure, yes,
um, yeah, maintain
and
those
some
temperatures.
could probably get over it if it truly maybe their gut microbiome helps with that. I don't know,
Right.
but I it it's something again it just so many the peril of so many animals is a lot of people will blame like, oh yeah, over collecting or the pet trade, and there is a and I agree to it to a point. There's some, especially smuggling and poaching, do play a role. Um, but the biggest cause of decline in biodiversity worldwide is habitat destruction. We're destroying these areas that need to be protected,
Right.
and when you destroy them, um, a lot of bad things result.
And even if you don't destroy the whole thing, you can leave these tiny fragments. It
But
still
th
has an
but
impact,
something
right?
but
The
yeah, like,
interrelationship.
it has a major impact because, like, for the most part, we think, like, snakes just, like, don't move or migrate, but indigos move, like, they've been tracked over 50 miles away, like, they move a lot, and, when you have a little area, like, they can't do it, and they're gonna get clipped by a car, or they'll cross the road, and there's no more habitat left because the new HOA is in town. Um, it's a
And
sad
even
reality.
longleaf specialists, your pine barrens, right, in Jersey, right, where pines is the same way, functional equivalence within that space, within that landscape.
Exactly. There's a carrying capacity in these areas, and every species is different. Their role, uh, their ecological role is variable depending on species, and I, we need to advocate for strong habitat protections. I mean, and captive breeding does not replace habitat protection, because if you don't protect habitat, captive breeding, yeah, you could keep the species around, but what the hell? I mean, you're not gonna. You want it to be in the wild because, well, I mean, just snakes in general. I mean, we could just talk about the benefits all day, but controlling pathogens shed by rodents, is just a prime example
Right.
of 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 the benefits of snakes. And again, it's a fine balance, but I could go on about the benefit of reptiles and keeping, and ecological diversity, but we'll be here for 5 hours. So,
And for the most part, I think people listening probably appreciate that.
yeah,
Might
no,
bring up novel points, but they'll
I'm really
get
passionate.
generally
Like, yeah, like I don't, I truly like you mentioned, I know we were talking about kind of beforehand of like keeping and collecting, and I'm happy to talk about. I don't really keep. So I do have wild caught. A lot of, actually, the majority of my wild caught is those Loxocemus, but um, I do like, in terms of collection. I don't like, around here. I don't really collect a lot, really, if at all, because I'm actually scared of SFD showing up in my animals here at home, where
Sure.
they don't have UVB light, and I don't expose them to all these like thermal gradients that they would experience in the wild. So I'm very careful with that. I mean, quarantine is super important. Um, in other areas of the country, I guess, you guys out by you, Justin and Rob, you don't have to worry about it as much.
Yeah.
But um, but yeah, down here, I mean, you gotta, if you collect any sort of snake, you do have to really quarantine, because I do not want that shit in my collection at all. So
Hmm. Yeah. Hmm.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Yeah, Justin, I don't know
Yeah.
if you had anything else that you wanted to hit on.
no,
Chris, you had something you want to hit on?
I think we covered it all. I need to join you guys on a herp trip out west at some point. Rob, it was fun herping with you a few weeks ago. Uh,
Yeah.
just for a few hours there, we found a few things. The muds weren't running as much. The mud
I
snakes.
told you we could wreck the streak. And what did I tell you? As soon as we started, you said 9 days in a row. And I said, well,
Yeah,
I promise you it won't be 10 since we're
yeah,
here.
yeah. But but anyway, yeah. No, I need to I need to go out there by you and find a rubber bow or two.
Yeah. Well, you'll be able to have a field guide for Utah pretty soon here.
Yeah, or a Washington County Gila.
Oh yeah, yeah. We've found a couple of those. They're a little bit of a tall order, but
Mhm.
But
yeah,
doable and
they're
beautiful.
doable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, nice. So
Yeah. Oh, I'm always looking for an excuse to get down and look for them. So let me
yeah,
know when you're headed out here,
I
and we'll
need
try
to
to.
go back out to that Western Veterinary Conference in Vegas. We went a few years ago,
There
but
you go.
not the right time. It's in March, so it's a little.
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess depending on the year. This year it probably would have been great.
Yeah, it would.
It
It
was so warm.
probably
Yeah.
would have. But yeah, no, thank
Yeah. March is pushing a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, no, but I'll be back. I'll be back out there.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
guys live in a great spot. I love exploring. So
Yeah. Well, where can people find you if they want to chat more about
yeah,
stuff?
yeah, you could really. I mean, I am on Facebook. I don't post
Mhm.
as much there. I really Instagram.
Yeah.
I do like Instagram. I do communicate on there quite often. It's Pelican State Reptiles is my username.
Okay.
They could find me on there, and if people have questions or want to learn more about something, I'm usually happy to talk and educate. Yes, I do. I like, as I mentioned earlier, I like being somewhat of a liaison for another herpetoculture community and the veterinary community, and
Mhm.
I am involved with captive reproduction of quite a few animals. So I'm the best of both worlds, and I always say to people too, I always learn. So I'm a veterinary. I know quite a bit about medical knowledge, but so much husbandry knowledge and captive care I learned from other people and reading, and Justin, your book. I have that, and I always read and learn and ask questions because I'm not. We all do things differently, and
Right.
sometimes things work for other people.
Yeah.
Sometimes things don't, but you get better with knowledge and education.
For sure. Yeah. All right. Well, great stuff. And thanks again for coming on. And we'll thank Eric and Owen and NPR for hosting us. And we'll catch you next time for Reptile Fight Club.
Yep.